There are some kids with autism where the only place they have friends is with online games where they talk to each other. So you don't want to take that away, but you've got to limit it somewhat because I'm not seeing good outcomes.
Welcome to the Healthy Screen Habits Podcast. We are the first generation to parent while balancing screens, life, and family. Each episode features insights, tips, and takeaways to help establish safe, mindful habits while living your family's healthiest digital life. I'm your host, Hillary Wilkinson. Now, whether you're starting your parenting journey with a newborn or looking to connect with your teen on technology, this is the podcast for you. It's rare you get the opportunity to speak with one of the greatest thinkers of our time. Today, I get the privilege of doing just that. Dr. Temple Grandin is a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. Facilities she has designed for handling livestock are used worldwide. Her research and techniques have been instrumental in implementing animal welfare auditing programs used by McDonald's, Whole Foods, and other corporations. Now, she has done this all by embracing her autism, channeling her unique gifts as a scientist and animal advocate, and now is encouraging kids to put down devices and get outside. I could not be more honored to welcome to the Healthy Screen Habits podcast, Temple Grandin.
It's really good to be here today.
Thank you. You have just published a truly delightful book. Thank you for sending me a copy of The Outdoor Scientist. Why did you decide to write this book now?
Well, I live in a neighborhood, lots of kids in it. I've lived in this neighborhood for 31 years, and you almost never see kids outside. They're just not doing the things outside that I did in the 50s as a child. I mean, mother would say, go outside and play. And my sister and I had a rock collection. We'd break rocks open to see what they looked like inside. I emphasize, got to wear safety goggles for doing that. And we had a really great rock collection in the tool shed. We'd collect shells on the beach and make stuff out of them. I can remember like taking buds apart to figure out how they developed.
Even at a young age, you were a scientist and observing nature already.
Well, I was like 8 when I was doing a lot of these things. And I have another book that came out 3 years ago, Calling All Minds, and that's outdoor stuff, but it's all more stuff where you make things like kites, parachutes, airplanes, things like that. Because we've got kids today. When I did a book signing for Calling All Minds 3 years ago, a good 20 or 30% of kids in Colorado had never made a paper airplane.
Wow.
I am not kidding. And I had a student in my class, my livestock handling class, the students have to do a scale drawing of a cattle handling facility. I had a student who had never used a ruler in her life to measure anything.
What are they doing instead? What in your experience because you work with college age kids.
This is college kids, never used a ruler. And I've been having a scale drawing in my class. I've taught that class for 31 years. In the last 5 or 6 years, they're having a harder and harder time with doing a scale drawing. And it gets back to where we've got kids growing up today, they don't do any practical things anymore.
I've heard firefighters say the same thing about kids coming into the firefighting academy who don't know the difference between, say, a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver.
Right. No, we've got kids kids today that have never used a tool. I think that's just terrible. And when I did the Calling All Minds book, one of the projects is in there. There's a project I did in about the 2nd grade. I can still remember my little kids' hands weren't very strong. And I took both hands to cut a coat hanger because I wanted to make a crossbar to put on my parachute strings that I made a parachute with a scarf. We grew up using tools. Every kid in the neighborhood was doing that. And I think the other problem we've got today is kids are terrified of making a mistake. And I think this goes back to not doing any hands-on things because I had these little kites I made that I had to tinker and tinker and tinker with to get them to work.
Uh-huh.
And I had to do quite a few pieces of paper before I got them to work. People ask me, what would I do if I could improve education? The first thing I would do is putting a lot of these hands-on things back in, cooking, sewing, woodworking. And we're getting individuals today totally removed from the world of practical things.
Right. I know in Calling All Minds, you talk about the difference between clever engineers and mathematical thinkers.
That's right.
And I love the parallel you draw between clever engineers and common sense, and the importance of giving kids experience to make things with their hands and bringing it back to healthy screen habits. That's part of the challenge of our digital age. Is this is what devices are keeping kids from doing, is they're providing experiences, but they're not providing physical hands-on experiences.
Well, I think we need to be using the screens, like kids that had never made a paper airplane, and there's lots of stuff on YouTube about making paper airplanes or making paper snowflakes. I was horrified within the last year when I talked about a kid making a paper snowflake. And I had a teacher ask me in all seriousness, what do you think is going to happen to the kid's self-esteem if the snowflake fell apart? Because he cut it out wrong. I said, well, you make another one. And
Right.
then maybe you look it up on YouTube. Okay, that's going to be using a screen to find out how to do a physical thing.
It's, we don't build confidence by just continually boosting people up. You build confidence. You build confidence through overcoming challenge. And whether you're being challenged through editing a paper or, like you said, like building a kite that doesn't fly, and then, working on that confidence building, then builds competence. So they work hand in hand, that whole confidence and competence.
But I've had so many parents say to me, my kid's afraid to make a mistake. My kids, everything's got to be perfect. You've got to do good work, but sometimes you do make mistakes. I remember wrecking a sewing project when I was about 12. I got in a hurry and I cut the fabric wrong and it wrecked it. I had to throw it away. There was no way to buy more fabric because it was a remnant.
Yeah. But I think it's important that we provide lots of those experiences for our kids to find out that the world's not going to end because you have to throw away the sewing project.
No, it did not end.
Yes. And look at you now.
I did have to throw it away.
I think this goes to that point of what we say at Healthy Screen Habits is we are not anti-technology. We are tech intentional. Using technology as a tool that it was intended for, and then moving forward with whatever project you're working on.
Well, that's the way I would look at it. I had a problem where my toilet broke, and I looked it up, and I found a YouTube video that showed me how to fix it.
I know that we call it YouTube University. So when we come back, we're going to speak more with Temple Grandin regarding what being on devices too long have to do with productivity.
Hi, I'm Amy Adams from Healthy Screen Habits. I have the privilege of running book club, and we invite you to join us each Friday over on Instagram at Healthy Screen Habits, where we discuss books that will help us create healthy screen habits for a balanced life. We have a book that we do every couple months, and we hope you'll join us and enjoy and learn and grow with us.
I'm back with Temple Grandin, who has recognized that autism gives her a unique lens on the world. You have spent the better part of your adult life translating animal behaviors and now exploring and explaining why all kids need to be using their hands, exploring outside, and really importantly, given license to fail. Temple, you encourage kids to use technology for the knowledge-seeking tool it was intended to be, and then use that to apply knowledge in the physical world. But I've also heard you warn against spending too much time online.
Well, what I'm saying is, especially with autistic kids, and when I spent 25 years working out heavy construction on supervising steel and concrete, cattle stockyards, and other things that I had designed, I worked with welders and machinery designers that owned their own businesses that I know were autistic. they were just as autistic as they could be. These are people I worked with in the 80s and the early 90s. And they were visual thinkers like me, thinking pictures. And what little video game playing I've done, I'm going, this is like a drug. I've got to stay away from this. And what I've seen with some of these kids now with an autism label is that, well, go out and get a job and do things. That's a good thing. Or end up just playing video games all day and doing nothing else.
Uh-huh.
And I've read the scientific literature, and there's a tendency for them to get more addicted to it than quite a few other people. So that has to be limited. And they're not becoming video game designers. If they were getting great jobs in video game design, I would not be criticizing it.
Right. So what would you say to parents of neurodiverse kids who ask, like, why do I have to take my kid off of their device? It seems like it's the only thing that makes them happy, or it's the only thing that makes that they like to do.
Well, they haven't discovered other things to do. I think this, and I'm not saying I wouldn't ban video games, but it's an hour a day, or you give them a certain budget of time a week. When I was a child, I mean, TV was a new thing. When I was a child, we were limited to 1 hour a day during the week and 2 hours on the weekend. Well, I think now with these online things where kids talk to each other, I know that's how some individuals get their best social life. You can say, well, you have a budget for the whole week. If you want to spend it on one marathon on Thursday for some big video game tournament, you can do it. But then the rest of the time you can't play it. But I have seen in the last couple of years 3 successful young adults getting off of video games. And the thing that the video game was replaced with was car mechanics. 3 different separate cases. And the kids found that car mechanics was more interesting than video games. One mom happily told me that her autistic kid now fixes trains for the railroad, and they love him. But the visual thinkers like me tend to we like mechanical things, art, photography, graphic design. That was the thing that successfully got them off of it.
And I think that speaks to your impassioned cry towards all parents to get kids outside and experiencing real life things.
This is the reason why I did the outdoor scientist is and a lot of the things that are in there, things I did as a child, the rocks, the shells, taking plants apart, different stages of development. I did that. I can remember when I was a child trying to watch Sputnik. We went to the field next door and all we saw was airplanes. But there's a chapter on the night sky where you can look at a NASA website to find a space station.
Oh, and I loved how you did the constellation map in the flashlight. There's one of the activities where you poke holes in paper and put it over the end of a flashlight. And kids
that's basically what a planetarium does, but in a much more complicated manner.
Right, but you could do it in your own bedroom.
Well, that's right. And I wanted to have simple things in both of these books, simple stuff that kids could do that's not expensive, that they could do. Now, one thing that I have in the Outdoor Scientist is a college project for kids to do, an actual college project I did for an animal behavior class. And what the assignment was is to spend 4 hours watching an animal. And my teacher says, no, you're not doing cattle. You're going to find something else to do. You're not doing dogs. They wanted us to kind of
branch out.
and I went to the zoo, and there were antelopes in this great big pen in Phoenix, Arizona. And I watched the antelopes. And after watching for a few hours, I found 2 males in adjacent pens went and put their locked horns through a chain link fence. They were going to duke it out with a chain link fence between them. And it was just something that only lasted for about 30 seconds. But I had to sit there 2 hours to see that. The rest of the behavior was pretty boring, walking around, eating, things like that. And that's the reason why the professor assigned it for 4 hours. So they could do an ethogram. I had a reporter say to me, well, what about kids in the city? There's nothing to observe for animals. I go, there's pigeons. You could go pick out a pigeon that's very distinctive, that's probably comes back, and you can start tracking what it does. That's an animal ethogram.
Right. Or even insects. Yeah. I love how in the Outdoor Scientist, the projects and activities, like you said, the projects are fabulous. The materials are easy to come by. Most can be found outside, or you already have the materials at home. And the projects range from artwork to experiments. And one of the other things that I really love about the book is that you spend a lot of time covering other scientists.
Yes.
And a lot of women scientists, women in history. And I think you did a beautiful job of just covering all of that, as well as giving us a peek into your world growing up, which was a different time. And so that lends its own interest to it. And then your experiences as a child with autism.
But a lot of the experiences that, things we did in this book, I mean, the other regular kids were doing it too. All this playing outside. Okay, one of the things is making a tent by putting a sheet over a rope. Well, we actually sewed some tents that were more elaborate than that out of multiple ripped up old bed sheets. But that's, and all the neighborhood kids were involved in this. This is just the kind of stuff that we would do when it was like go outside and figure out stuff to do, make a tent out of old bed sheets.
Going back to the technology side of things, it's not that you're against technology. No. It's just the amount of time that is being spent on a device, on a video game, when a kid could be doing something that's exposing them to other things, correct?
Well, that's right. And you can use, even the thing like the paper snowflake will go, I'm sure there's YouTube videos about that. There's all kinds of stuff available online making paper airplanes. But the thing that shocked me was 1 out of 4, or maybe 1 out of 3, it was somewhere in between there, elementary school children out in a nice part of a city outside of Denver had never made a paper airplane. I was shocked. And they got their chance to make a paper airplane for the first time at this big theater, and they were chucking them off the balcony. And they discovered it was a lot of fun. And I'm concerned about losing skills. There's a tendency to sort of not give enough credit to craftsmanship skills.
Right. You shared your interest in flight and space travel, even starting with trying to view Sputnik from a field when you were younger. As we're recording today, a historical event took place earlier this week in space travel with the landing of the Mars rover, the Perseverance. Have you been following that?
I was online last night. Okay, now this is using a screen, and Perseverance is taking really interesting selfie with her robotic arm up on Mars. And she's showing off her beautiful handcrafted cable bundles. Somebody built that by hand. I had already looked up the camera company. I already found the cameras. There's hand-done wiring on those cameras. A lot of this stuff was built in the shop. You're not talking about something that's mass-produced in the factory. You've got craftspeople made this thing. So they're not getting enough credit.
And I remember speaking with you earlier, you had told me about working on a meat packaging plant where all of the machinery had to be brought in from Europe.
Oh, poultry now?
Oh, it was poultry. It wasn't.
Poultry processing plant, state of the art. It's about 2 years old now. And all of the engineering, I call it the clever engineering equipment, mechanically clever devices are from Europe. Now, the other thing that's interesting is when the patent office first started, it was all the visual thinkers. You had to bring models in. It was all what I'm going to call clever engineering. And we're not making this stuff anymore. And I think this goes back to Holland and other Europe, Germany, those countries, they skilled trades are not looked down upon. And,
right. And
they're
kids
respected a whole lot more. And they're making this stuff, and it costs astronomical sums of money to bring poultry processing equipment over here in 100 shipping containers. Astronomical.
Yes, not to mention the effect that, the carbon footprint on that. I know you've explained how the way you think, you see things in pictures and you do not believe that the algebra that's being pushed, it's almost screening potential clever engineers out of the engineering field.
People, there's two kinds of thinking that go into designing and engineering. First of all, you have an engineering department in the university. You'll have an industrial design department. That's more my department. But I'm what's called an object visualizer. That's a scientific name to me, an object visualizer. The mathematical kind of person is the visual spatial person. And unfortunately, there's a lot of studies that mix those two together, and that's wrong. But the visual spatial is the more mathematics. And when I did my book, The Autistic Brain, I provided science for that. And there's now been more studies that show that this is true. And you get somebody that's got a label, they tend to be more extreme, maybe mathematical, or more extreme, maybe object visualizing. But my kind of mind absolutely can't do algebra. I can do my old-fashioned 5th and 6th grade arithmetic the way it used to be taught, like find the area of a circle. I know how to do that. I can, figure out how much carpet you need to do to, carpet a room. I measure things. That's stuff that I know how to do. But I'm concerned that we're screening out these kids. The other thing that's screening them out is they're growing up and not getting a chance to use tools. They're not growing up and getting enough chance to do hands-on things.
Now, when you spoke about earlier, you talked about when you first saw video games and you were looking at video games as that visual-based thinker, you said, "Oh, I can't do this," because you recognized that
I played them some.
Okay.
I played them some, and I thought I'd been on it for 20 minutes. I'd been on it for 4 hours.
Yeah, it's that persuasive design.
Use my computer all the time to look up scientific articles, look things up online, do conferences like this.
You just recognize that the games are something that are not for you.
I better stay away from them. Now, there's lots of people that play them perfectly fine and they're not addicted to them. And there's some kids with autism where the only place they have friends is with online games where they talk to each other. So you don't want to take that away. But you've got to limit it somewhat because I'm not seeing good outcomes. The outcome is not top video game designer. That's right. Usually, it doesn't seem to go that way. Maybe some exception to that, and that's just great. But there probably has parents behind that were directing them more towards, well, you got to design video game that somebody else wants.
Right. And unless you have kind of parents that are maybe involved in Silicon Valley or maybe involved in that area and they know how to channel those efforts, that isn't necessarily something that's...
There was an article in the paper a while back where Silicon Valley parents were restricting all the video game playing. They were restricting that.
Yes.
Because they know how addictive it is. And a lot of them send their kids to Montessori schools, which would have a lot of hands-on activities.
Exactly. They've got a lot of hands-on activities, a lot of immersive experiences, and sensory things that happen. I think the challenge also when we get into the digital platforms, particularly with our neurodiverse kids, is it locks them into one way of experiencing, and we need to be working on expanding. Can you talk a little bit about how your mom encouraged you to stretch?
My mother had a really good sense that shouldn't just be doing the same thing over and over again. Because when I was in about 3rd grade, I'd just draw the same horse head over and over again. And my mother would say, let's draw the stable. Let's, draw where we rode it to. In other words, make an associative link back, and let's try some other media. Let's do a watercolor of a beach. Take that art ability and expand it. So it's not just the same horse head over and over and over again. Expand that. That's what we need to be doing.
Right. Whatever interest the child is showing, you take that and move forward with it.
That's right.
I agree.
And you expand it and encourage lots of different things. But I've seen kids like 16 years old, they've done all of the most complicated Legos, and that's fine, but the kid has still never used a tool. It's just ridiculous. And we've got a gigantic shortage of skilled trades. And when I had to have my shower fixed, this was during COVID, the cost was just ridiculous. Because I couldn't spend a day and a half messing with it with 2 other apartments turned off.
Right.
So I had to call the plumber, and I hate to tell you what it cost.
Oh, I believe it. Okay. We often talk about keeping spaces screen-free where we don't allow devices. What do you think about that?
Well, I really agree with that. And in the 50s when I was brought up, that was true in our dining room and in the next door neighbor kids too. that when we all had dinner together, we weren't allowed to bring books, toys, or comics or anything like that to the dinner table. This was the time for the family to be together and talk about their day and take turns talking.
I do think that that is one of the interesting things that during our time of quarantine that it has brought us is I do see more families engaging in more connected things. I think because people are kind of technologically saturated, if you will, where they've spent their whole day on Zoom or...
That's right.
And so I do see more families outside taking walks or going on bike rides.
I've seen that too.
Yeah.
I have seen that too. Whole families out on bikes. And then I heard that the online jigsaw puzzles sold out just about instantly.
Oh, yes. We always have a jigsaw puzzle going. We're going to take a quick ad break, and we come back. We're going to be listening to Temple Grandin give us one healthy screen habit. Special thanks to the Doctors Petty, Laura Hoffman, and Danielle Waters for their financial support of healthy screen habits. It allows us to continue our mission of educating and empowering families to create their healthiest screen habits. I'm talking with Temple Grandin, a woman voted by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. She is on a mission to get kids exploring and outside. So, Temple, on every episode of the Healthy Screen Habits podcast, I ask for one healthy screen habit that our listeners can put into practice in their own home. Do you have one?
Oh, I definitely do, because there's all kinds of great resources on the internet. In my book, The Outdoor Scientist, I refer to the NASA website. I refer to National Geographic on Citizen Science. There's great websites on mathematics, Wolfram Mathematica, wolf like the animal, ram also like the animal, code.org to teach programming, fabulous educational resources. A lot of this stuff is free, and use these things to complement things that you do outside. Okay, let's say you're watching birds. Well, you can look them up online. You can go on things like Google Scholar and look up, that's maybe for older kids, but scientific articles about it. All kinds of videos on YouTube that show you how to do things. Use it to complement rather than just totally take over.
I love that. Use it as the tool it was designed for, as a complementary type thing to an activity outside. And for any of our listeners who want to go out and buy their own copy of The Outdoor Scientist, I will link it in our show notes. But most importantly, I'd say take those kids and get outside. Thank you, Temple. It's been a true honor to speak with you today.
It was wonderful to be here, and thank you for having me.
For more information, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Healthy Screen Habits. Make sure to visit our website, healthyscreenhabits.org, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. It's free, it's fun, and you get a healthy new screen habit each week. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate you giving us a quick rating. It really does help other people find us and spread the word of healthy screen habits. Or if you'd simply like to tell a friend, we'd love that too. I so appreciate you spending your time with me this week, and I look forward to learning more healthy habits together.